Hi guys, my name is Regan McCaffery. I'm the fine wine manager here at Glengarry. So I get to deal with all of our very best products like Bordeaux, Burgundy, and of course Champagne. That's what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about two of our most famous brands and two of the most famous champagne houses in the world, which is Piper-Heidsieck and Champagne Pol Roger. Okay, so what makes champagne champagne? Well, firstly, it has to be from the Champagne region of France, which is a very small region just to the northeast of Paris. Now, in that region, they have a very, very special soil as well as a special climate. It's the most northerly grape growing region in the entire world, so it's very, very hard to ripen grapes there. And it also has a very special soil made up of ancient limestone. So it's basically chalk, exactly the same as the chalk that you would have used on your blackboard when you were at school. Now, champagne has to be made in a very special method, and the most important thing about this method is that it has a secondary fermentation inside the bottle. So basically they make a still wine, the same as we normally make here in New Zealand, and then they take that still wine and they put it inside the special strengthened champagne bottle, and it's strengthened to take the high pressure that's going to be in there, and they add a little bit of sugar and a little bit of yeast into there, mix it together, and then they put a crown cap on the top of it, just like a beer cap that goes on your bottle of beer. What happens is that yeast devours the sugar, and the byproduct of the yeast eating the sugar is carbon dioxide. Now, of course, that carbon dioxide doesn't have anywhere to go, it's stuck in the bottle, and so it slowly dissolves into the wine, and that's where we get our bubbles from. Now what we need to do is undo the cage. Putting your thumb over the top of the cork, untwist the cage. Something interesting about that is there's always 6 twists to remove the cage. Then hold onto the cork tightly, grab the bottom of the bottle and twist the bottle holding onto the cork. Don't turn the cork, and the cork will just come straight out of the bottle like that. Now when we pour it out, remember, you're not pouring beer, so you don't need to tilt the glass. Just pour directly into the glass and let it bubble up. And once that settles down, then you can go back and top up the glass. So the house of Piper-Heidsieck was originally founded in 1785 by Florence Louise Heidsieck. At that time, the house was known as Heidsieck & Co., and it was a favorite of Marie Antoinette at Versailles, and in fact, he presented the champagne personally to her. Now, after he died, the company was taken over by his cousin Christian Heidsieck and his business partner, Henri Piper. Now, what happened there was after Christian died, Henri did what any honourable partner would do, and of course, married his partner's widow. After that stage, he would travel around the world selling Piper all over the place, known as Heidsieck at this stage, and people would say, it's Piper's Heidsieck, and that's how the champagne became known as Piper-Heidsieck combined with the two names. Now, looking at this champagne, a very traditional champagne, a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Now you can see the bubbles coming up in the glass. Now something some people wonder about is when you pour out a champagne and you can't see any bubbles. Now the indication of how bubbly the champagne is can only come from how it feels inside your mouth. If your glass is perfectly clean, or if you've washed it with detergent, there'll actually be no bubbles in there because the glass actually needs to have some imperfections or some dust inside it to actually have a nuclei for those bubbles to form from. So don't worry if there's no bubbles visible in your glass, you'll feel them in the mouth. Now, Piper-Heidsieck is very much a party champagne. It's about extravagance, it's about elegance, it's quite light and fresh on the palate, very exuberant, but you can actually age the bottles. If you age them for a year or two, they'll build quite a toasty richness if you prefer that stronger, more masculine style of champagne. So next we're going to move on to possibly my favorite champagne house, Champagne Pol Roger. Now this house was started in 1849 and it's still a family house today. It's one of only 5 of the great houses that are still in family hands and family run. Now the house was started by a man called Pol Roger. Now he unfortunately died after being very successful in 1899, and his sons George and Maurice took over the house. And in honor of their father, they actually petitioned the President of France to change their surname And it was very, very difficult at this stage to actually change your surname. You had to have a presidential decree. And they changed their surname from Roger to Pol Roger in honor of their father, and that is how the name of the house originally came about. Now they're based in Epinay on the Avenue de Champagne, and a very, very interesting story about Epinay and Pol Roger is Maurice was the mayor of Epinay in 1914 when the Germans swept through across the area. All the authorities had left, the police had left, and he actually went out to the gates with the townspeople and entered into negotiations with the German army, kept them at bay for a number of days until the Allied army actually swept through and the Germans had to retreat. And in honor of his bravery, all of the townspeople of Epinay presented him with a leather-bound book with all of their names signed in it and elected him mayor all the way through until 1935 when he retired. And then, of course, he was elected honorary mayor for life. So Pol Roger, the family, and the Champagne has a very, very special place in the history of Epinay and the history of Champagne. All right, let's open some Pol Roger. Now, one reason we always keep our thumb on the cap when we're undoing it is the major cause of eye injuries in France every year is champagne corks to the eye. True story. Now, if you remember from earlier, the three major grape varieties in Champagne are Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier. Now, Champagne Pol Roger is the most perfectly balanced of all of the champagnes because it contains all three of them in exactly equal proportions. 33% Pinot Noir, 33% Chardonnay, and 33% Pinot Meunier. And this contributes to a champagne that is a champagne for all occasions. It's perfectly balanced, it's elegant, but it's also rich and powerful. And so it appeals to people who like both ends of the spectrum. Well, that's all from me today. I hope you learned something a little bit about champagne today. If you want to learn something else, you can go onto our website. You can purchase through there as well, or you can come down to any of our stores around. If you'd like to meet me and talk about champagne directly, I'm based down at the Victoria Park store, and you'll often find me in the cellar. Tough day at the office.